She called it discipline, a hard slap in an empty conference room for breaking the rules. I didn't fight back. I just turned my camera on, letting her own rules do the talking. Everyone here fears her. The chief people officer, my father's new wife, the woman who wrote our entire code of conduct. But rulemakers forget one thing. A camera doesn't care about hierarchy. My name is Nora Vale. I am 28 years old, and I am a senior specialist in risk management and compliance at Norfield Ledger. My job is to know the rules, all of them, the ones written, the ones implied, and the ones people break in the dark. Tonight, the dark was on the 23rd floor of the Grayford Tower, 7:42 p.m. The elevator doors opened with a soft, synthetic chime, delivering me to a void. The 23rd floor is Executive Row. After 6 p.m., it's a graveyard of glass and brushed steel. The motion sensors in the ceiling were slow, lagging behind my footsteps, so I walked through pools of shadow, the light snapping on 3 seconds too late, illuminating the corridor behind me. The carpet, a tight weave industrial gray, was still damp in patches, releasing the sharp chemical odor of an after-hours cleaning crew. It smelled like bleach and chilled. Treated air. A high, thin whine came from the server room 2 doors down, the only sound besides the distant, heavy thrum of the building's HVAC system pushing chilled air into the empty space. I walked past the glass-walled office of my father. Thomas Vale, CEO, dark, past the CFO's office, dark. I stopped at the door labeled Chief People Officer. The light was on. She was waiting for me in conference room 23B. The summit, a room reserved for board meetings and high-level terminations. The room was cold, the air static. Celeste Arden, the Chief People Officer, stood by the far window, a black silhouette against the neon and diamond spray of the city skyline. She didn't turn when I entered. She let the silence stretch, a tactic I'd seen her use in quarterly reviews. She was my stepmother, a title she had held for 8 months, ever since she'd finalized the merger between her life and my father's. She'd moved from a competitor's HR department to Norfield Ledger, and my father, in a gesture of family unity, had promoted her to CPO within a week. "Close the door, Nora," she said. Her voice was smooth, polished, the kind of voice that could announce mass layoffs and make it sound like an exciting growth opportunity. I closed the door. The heavy glass partition settled into its frame with a pressurized hiss, sealing us in. The room smelled only of her, a heavy, expensive perfume, something dark and woody, that suffocated the bleach odor from the hall. "You're late," she said, finally turning. Her suit was charcoal gray, impeccably tailored, her blonde hair pulled back into a severe knot. She looked less like a person and more like an architectural rendering. "Your message arrived at 7:35 p.m., I said, my voice flat. I placed my leather briefcase on the enormous obsidian table, right on the polished surface, not on a coaster, a small act of defiance. "I came from the 14th floor. It's 7:43 p.m. "Don't," she snapped. The polish cracked, just a little. "Don't use your compliance voice on me." She walked toward me, her heels making no sound on the thick carpet. "I called you up here because you have broken the rules. Specifically, Policy 4.7b, regarding internal communication protocols." I kept my expression neutral. Policy 4.7b, circumvention of established communication hierarchies. I knew what this was about, the anonymous tip, the one I'd routed through an external, encrypted email service to a third-party ethics hotline we retained, detailing the discrepancies in the Wellspring Employee Welfare Fund, the fund she personally oversaw, the fund that had seen a 300% increase in consulting fees paid to a vendor that didn't seem to exist. "I'm not aware of any violation," I said. Celeste stopped, standing too close, well inside the accepted professional boundary. I could see the precise application of her foundation, the faint lines of concentration around her mouth. She wanted me to be afraid. In my role, I interview people who embezzle, who commit fraud, who harass. I am not easily frightened. Breaking the rules, Nora. She whispered it this time, her voice freighted with a venomous intimacy. She hated that I existed. I was the living, breathing artifact of my father's first marriage, a walking conflict of interest in her new corporate empire. She leaned in, and her hand came up. It was fast, a calculated strike, not a crime of passion. Her palm, heavy with rings, connected with my left cheek. The sound was shockingly loud in the soundproofed room, a flat, wet crack. My head snapped to the side. A sharp, stinging heat blossomed instantly, and I tasted the coppery tang of blood where my teeth had cut the inside of my cheek. I did not make a sound. I did not gasp. I did not cry out. I did not raise a hand to my face. I simply took one measured step back, reestablishing a professional distance, and met her gaze. My pulse was a steady, cold drum. On the table, my briefcase sat angled toward her. My phone lay on top of it. The screen was black, appearing to be locked. But it wasn't locked. The black box recording app was running, just as it had been since I stepped off the elevator. The high-sensitivity microphone was active. It had captured her footsteps. It had captured her voice. It had captured, with perfect, damning fidelity, the sound of the slap. Celeste watched me, waiting for a reaction. Tears, anger, a panicked apology. I gave her nothing. I gave her only compliance. That, I said, my voice perfectly level, though my cheek was on fire, is a violation of the Norfield Ledger Code of Conduct, Section 3, Subsection A, Workplace Violence and Harassment. For a second, she looked stunned. Then, she laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. It was sharp, an expulsion of air. You are incredible. You really are. She walked back to the table, picked up a single sheet of paper, and slid it toward me. A pre-written disciplinary action report. My name was already typed at the top. It cited Policy 4.7b. It detailed my insubordinate and disruptive action of spreading unverified rumors through non-sanctioned channels. It required my signature, acknowledging the violation and agreeing to immediate probationary status. Sign it, she said. We'll forget this little meeting ever happened. I'm not signing an admission of guilt, I said. You'll sign it, or you'll be cleaning out your desk tomorrow. Your father won't stop me. He knows how important family loyalty is. This isn't a family matter. This is a corporate proceeding, and in that case, I'd like a witness from legal present and a copy of the evidence against me. I am the Chief People Officer, Nora. I am the proceeding. She jabbed a finger at the paper. There is no witness. There is no lawyer. There is just this, and you, and me. What rule, I asked, my voice as cold as the room, allows a manager to isolate an employee after hours, without representation, for a disciplinary action involving physical contact? Celeste smiled. It was the smile she saved for the press, all teeth and ice. My rules. She pushed the company-branded pen across the table, a heavy silver-plated rollerball. I looked at her, at the paper, then at my phone. The camera was capturing this perfectly. The paper was in the frame. Her hand was in the frame. The pen was in the frame. I picked up the pen. The metal was cold. I uncapped it and bent over the document. Celeste watched, her posture relaxing, believing she had won. I did not sign the signature line. Below the block of text, in the empty white space, I wrote clearly, "Document received." I signed my name, Nora Vale. Then I added the date and the time from my watch, October 23rd, 7:49 p. I slid the paper back to her. Her eyes scanned what I'd written. The smile vanished. That's not... You told me to sign it, I interrupted. I have signed to acknowledge receipt of the document. I am not, however, attesting to the accuracy of its contents. That will require a formal review. She stared at me, her face hardening into a mask of pure fury. The CPO had been outmaneuvered by a subordinate, by her stepdaughter. "Get out," she hissed. "Am I free to go?" I asked, a procedural question. "Get out." I capped the pen and placed it deliberately on the table. I picked up my phone, stopping the recording as I slid it into my pocket. I lifted my briefcase. My cheek throbbed, a dull, hot ache, but I walked steadily to the door. I opened it and stepped back into the dark, sensor-lit hallway. The bleach smell felt clean after the suffocation of her perfume. I did not go to the elevator. I walked down the hall, past my father's dark office, to the service corridor near the fire stairs. Mounted on the wall was the emergency key box, a red metal cabinet with a glass front. A sign above it read, Stairwell E. I wasn't interested in the keys. I was interested in the small laminated card slotted into a holder on the wall next to the box. It was the manual checkout log for building services. I took out my phone. I didn't photograph the keys. I photographed the log, and then I photographed the small brass plaque beneath the key box. Building management CCTV active in this stairwell. Exit. E, the one that led to the loading bay. The one whose cameras were monitored and archived not by Norfield Ledger's internal security, but by the Grayford Tower's own building management. The one camera Celeste didn't control. I looked at the photo of the log, the last entry, from 2 nights ago. 10:15 p.m. Master key. Floor 23. Checked out. See? Arden. I turned and walked to the elevator, my face burning, the recording safe in my pocket. The rules were broken, and the evidence was secure. The elevator doors closed, sealing me in a steel box. My reflection floated on the polished chrome surface. Nora Vale, 28, risk specialist, face slightly asymmetrical. The left side of my face was a tight, hot mask. The skin was already beginning to swell. The red imprint of her hand a perfect, 5-fingered stain. I did not touch it. I forced myself to look away from the reflection and instead focus on the digital floor counter as it ticked downward. 23, 22, 21. My father, Thomas Vale, married Celeste Arden 8 months ago. It was a whirlwind affair, conducted with the same ruthless efficiency he used for corporate acquisitions. He was the CEO, a widower for a decade, focused on legacy. She was, at the time, a high-flying HR executive at a rival tech firm, all sharp angles and predatory charm. I remember their wedding, a small, aggressively tasteful event at a modern art gallery. The backdrop was a 50-foot canvas of chaotic red paint. My father, his eyes softer than I'd seen them in years, raised his glass. To new beginnings, he'd said. To Celeste, to finally making this family whole again, to family unity. I'd sipped my champagne. Family unity became the new corporate mantra before the ink was dry on the marriage certificate. Within 2 weeks, Celeste had divested from her old firm and was welcomed into the Norfield Ledger family. She didn't just transfer, she was installed. My father created the chief people officer role specifically for her, consolidating all of human resources, internal communications, and employee ethics under her direct authority. The elevator chimed at the lobby. The night guard, Mike, looked up from his desk, his eyes widening slightly as I stepped out. He saw my face. Ms. Vale, are you working late? Mike, I said, my voice clipped but even. Forgot to clock out on the 14th. He winced, a silent, knowing look that told me everything I needed to know about Celeste's reputation. He didn't ask again. He just nodded as I pushed through the glass doors. The night air was cold. It felt good on my cheek. I didn't take a cab. I walked the 12 blocks back to my apartment in Norfield Quarters, the sterile, company-subsidized housing complex where half the mid-level managers lived. The walk let me organize the data. The video file was 12 minutes, 44 seconds. The audio was crystal clear. The slap was at timestamp 0417. My apartment was as gray and orderly as the office. I didn't turn on the main lights. I went straight to my home workstation, plugged in my phone, and initiated a 3-point backup of the black box file. 1 copy to an encrypted solid-state drive, 1 to a partitioned segment of my personal server, and the 3rd, which I began uploading to a secure cloud vault. While it uploaded, I looked at the only personal item on my desk, a framed copy of Norfield Ledger's 12 Cultural Rules. Celeste had implemented them in her first month. They were laser-etched onto giant glass panels in the lobby, on the walls of every conference room, and on the frosted glass dividers between our desks. We were quizzed on them in mandatory culture workshops. They were like scripture, and Celeste was their high priestess. They were full of optimized corporate speak. Embrace radical transparency, own your outcomes, iterate with integrity. And then there were her two favorites. Rule 3. All feedback must follow sanctioned channels. Anonymous reporting is counterproductive to transparency. Rule 7. We are a professional family. Do not bring personal conflicts or external grievances into the workplace. I stared at Rule 7, my face throbbing in time with the blinking cursor of the upload bar. Do not bring personal conflicts into the workplace. She had slapped her daughter in a conference room while disciplining her employee. She had shredded the line between family and corporation, and now she was hiding behind it. She called me Nora in the office, but at Sunday brunch, which my father now insisted on, she called me darling. 2 weeks ago, I'd watched her smile at my younger brother, Jason, telling him he should really think about an internship with the company. Then, on Monday, I overheard her telling the head of IT that Nora Vale's account should be flagged for monitoring, as I was an employee who resists cultural integration. I was family when it suited her narrative, and a risk to be managed when I wasn't. What Celeste didn't know, what no one knew, not even my father, was that I had already broken Rule 3, months before my anonymous tip about the Wellspring Fund. As a risk specialist, I knew our existing whistleblowing system was a joke. It routed all complaints directly to a general HR inbox, which, thanks to her promotion, was now monitored by her hand-picked lieutenants. It wasn't a reporting channel. It was an intelligence gathering tool. 6 months ago, I had spent 3 weeks of my own time drafting a new, truly independent whistleblowing protocol. It detailed a secure, third-party intake system, a direct line escalation path to the independent board committee, the one part of the company Celeste didn't control, and explicit protections against retaliation. I wrote it, encrypted it, and sent it from a public library computer to the private email of the board's chairman, an old guard executive who distrusted Celeste's rapid rise. I never heard back, but I knew he'd read it. The upload finished. I ejected the phone. Celeste's control was absolute. She managed my father's calendar. I'd learned this the hard way 3 months ago. When I tried to send my father a critical risk assessment on a new data vendor, I got no reply. A week later, I saw my father in the hall and asked him about it. He looked confused. What email? Nora? I didn't see it. I went back to my desk and did a trace. Celeste had implemented an email filter on his executive account. Any message from Nora Vale at norfieldledger.com that didn't also have a VP or higher on the CC line was automatically diverted to a folder labeled Family. She told him it was to protect his focus, so he could engage with me as a daughter, not just an employee. He'd praised her for the idea. The climate of fear she'd created was suffocating. People were terrified of her, not just because she was the CPO, but because she was the CEO's wife. She held both personal and professional power, and she wielded them as one. Last quarter, Mark, a talented guy in marketing, made a joke in a team meeting about the 12 rules being the 12 commandments. 2 days later, Mark was reassigned. He was moved from the high-profile digital campaign to legacy media archiving. His quarterly bonus was denied for non-alignment with cultural values. Nobody spoke up. Nobody even made eye contact with him in the cafeteria. I looked at my face in the bathroom mirror. The swelling was pronounced. The red was darkening to a mottled purple. I could go to the police. I could walk into the 17th precinct right now and file an assault report. It would be my word against hers. She would claim I was a disgruntled employee, a bitter stepdaughter. She would leak to the press that I was unstable. She would use Rule 7 against me, painting me as a hysterical woman bringing family drama to the office. My father, desperate to protect his family unity, would side with her. He would believe her version of the truth. I would be fired, discredited, and Celeste would remain. No. The police was not the answer. Going to the police was an emotional response. I needed a systemic one. Celeste had built a fortress of rules. She thought they protected her. She didn't realize she had also built her own prison. She had created a closed system, and in a closed system, every action creates an equal and opposite data trail. I wasn't going to report her for assault. I was going to audit her. The slap was just leverage. The true crime was the one she thought she'd hidden. The Wellspring Fund. The phantom Arden and North consulting firm. The falsified invoices. My job is risk management. My job is to find the cracks in the system. The slap was not a crack. It was an earthquake. It had shaken the entire foundation, and now the real flaws were visible. I opened my laptop and made a call on a secure line. Pike and Associates. Jordan Pike, please, tell him it's Nora Vale. I had hired Jordan Pike 2 months ago. The moment I first saw the Arden and North name on a vendor payment log, he wasn't a flashy courtroom brawler. He was an independent employment lawyer, a quiet, meticulous man who specialized in corporate malfeasance and retaliation claims. Nora, his voice came on the line, calm and dry. You're calling after hours. Is this the signal? It's a new data packet, I said. I'm sending you the access key to a new file in the Cloud Vault. Title it Exhibit A, HR Interaction, 10 to 23. I need you to download it, place it in escrow with the other materials, and generate a hash confirmation. Do not review it unless I'm compromised or I instruct you to. Understood. Is there anything else? I paused, my fingers tracing the hot, raised skin on my cheek. Celeste Arden just escalated. She physically assaulted me in a closed-door meeting tonight. There was a sharp intake of breath on his end. Nora, that changes everything. We can go to the board, the police. That's a criminal charge and a slam-dunk civil suit. No, Jordan, it's not. It's just leverage. My voice was ice. She's arrogant. She thinks her rules protect her. She's forgotten that the rules of corporate governance, the real ones, are stronger than her 12 platitudes on glass. She's forgotten that data is stronger than blood. I hung up before he could argue. I opened a new file on my encrypted drive, a mind map. I titled it Audit Path. Celeste had locked every door. She controlled HR, my father's inbox, the internal reporting system, and the company's social narrative. But she made mistakes. She used the company's internal SAP for the fake vendor payments. I had log access. She used the building's exit E stairs. Building management had those camera logs. And she signed her name to the 12 rules. Rule 11. We do not tolerate violence, verbal or physical, in any form. My plan began to form, not as a messy, emotional outburst, but as a cold, clean compliance review. I would use her own system. I would follow her own rules, and I would use them, one by one, as the keys to unlock every single door she had locked against me. She wrote the rulebook. She just didn't realize I was the one who was going to enforce it. The pain in my cheek had subsided to a dull, metallic throb. I ignored it. Physical pain is a temporary data point. It generates no actionable reports. I was back in my apartment, bathed in the blue-white light of my 3-monitor workstation. The recording of the slap was already secured with Jordan Pike. That was Exhibit A. It was the leverage, the shield. Now I needed the weapon, and the weapon was the money. My investigation had started 3 months ago, triggered by a single line item in a quarterly benefits review. The Norfield Ledger, Wellspring Employee Welfare Fund. It was a fund designed to cover discretionary employee needs, mental health support, emergency travel, wellness seminars. Celeste had taken personal control of it, calling it a key pillar of her new culture strategy. The line item was an expense for specialized employee consulting. The amount was unremarkable, but the vendor was not. Arden and North. Arden, her name. It was sloppy. It was arrogant. It was the act of someone who believed they were untouchable. I ran a corporate registry search. Arden and North, LLC, had been filed with the state 9 months ago, 1 week after her engagement to my father was announced. Now, I opened the Norfield Ledger vendor portal. My credentials as a risk analyst gave me read-only access to the entire vendor database. I typed in the vendor code I'd memorized from the invoice. Vendor ID 909ANC. Status approved. Priority payment. Address 14 Norcross Lane, Suite 218. I cross-referenced the address. 14. Norcross Lane was not an office building. It was a commercial mail service, a wall of brass-plated P&O boxes inside a copy shop. Suite 218 was a 5x7-inch locked box. Red flag number 1. The real work began in the SAP financial module. I wasn't just a compliance analyst. I was a certified systems auditor. I lived in these logs. I pulled the complete payment history for vendor 909ANC. The payment started small, then escalated, but they never followed a logical pattern. They were for services rendered, but the invoices were boilerplate. Culture workshop consultation, executive morale strategy, benefit integration review. The total paid out in just 6 months, $498,000. I filtered the payments by date and amount. A pattern emerged. There were 10 distinct payments, all made in the last 2 quarters. $49,800, $49,800, $49,800, $49,800, $49,800, $49,800, $49,800, $49,800, $49,800, $49,800. My breath caught. This was not just sloppy. This was textbook structuring. The Norfield Ledger system, which I had helped configure, had a mandatory automated audit flag for any single non-payroll expenditure over $50,000. The flag required a secondary, independent VP-level sign-off. By splitting the payments into tranches of $49,800, Celeste had kept the entire $500,000 siphon just under the automated threshold. It was a $200 difference between stealth and exposure. But an approval was still required. I cross-referenced the approval timestamps. Every single payment had been approved by Celeste's own executive account. C. Arden CPO. This was a direct violation of internal controls, which required a separation of duties. She was requesting the service, managing the vendor, and approving the payment. I dug deeper into the server-side action logs for her account. I wanted to know how she did it, and I found it. The approvals all happened between 10 o'clock p.m. and 11 o'clock p.m. on a Friday night, and just before each one, a specific system command was logged. Set approval mode. Delegate user, C. Arden CPO. Target, T. Vale CEO. She was using the system's delegation feature. This feature, designed for executives to let their assistants manage their calendars, allowed one user to act on behalf of another. She was logging in as herself, activating delegation authority for my father's CEO account, and then approving her own invoices as him. The system log would show, to a cursory glance, that T. Vale CEO had approved the payment, but the server-side meta packet, the data about the data, showed the truth. The action was initiated by C. Arden CPO using delegated authority. She was laundering her approvals through his credentials, believing no one would ever look this deep. She was framing my father for her own fraud. The money was one half of the equation, the other was the service. I now had to prove that Arden and North had delivered nothing for its $500,000. The invoices cited training. I navigated to the shared Google Drive for the HR department. Under a folder titled Culture Initiative FY25, I found what I was looking for: training attendance rosters. They were pathetic. A series of Google Sheets, one for each workshop. Each sheet listed 30 or 40 employee names. Beside each name was a column for a signature. I zoomed in. The signature for David McMillan on Sheet 1 was identical, down to the pixel, to his signature on Sheet 5. I overlaid them in a separate analysis program. It was a perfect copy-paste. I checked another name. Sarah Jenkins. The same. Her signature was a single PNG file, slightly skewed and resized on different lines to give the illusion of variance. These workshops had never happened. These were ghost meetings. The $500,000 was for a stack of forged digital documents. I continued digging. Celeste had also taken over a new pilot program, Norfield Future, a childcare subsidy benefit. It was her pet project, lauded in a company-wide email as proof of our commitment to the working family. I pulled the timesheets for the program's administrative staff. The program was small, only 3 part-time coordinators, but a 4th name was on the payroll. Vale, J. My blood went cold. J, Vale, Jason Vale, my younger brother. Jason is a sophomore in college, studying marine biology. He lives 2,000 miles away. He has never, not for one day, worked at Norfield Ledger. I pulled his employee file. His social security number was correct. His bank account, listed for direct deposit, was one I didn't recognize. He was listed as a program liaison, drawing a salary of $1,500 a week for 6 months. She wasn't just stealing from the company. She was using my brother's identity to do it. This was wire fraud and identity theft, plain and simple. This moved the case from a corporate firing to a federal crime. Now I had the digital trail. I needed the physical one. I went back to the photo I took in the hallway. The checkout log for the emergency key in stairwell E, signed by C. Arden. It was from last Wednesday night, 10:15 p.m., days after my anonymous tip had been routed to the ethics hotline, and crucially, to her. She had been notified of an investigation. Her first move was to clean house. I needed the tape. At 8 a.m. the next morning, I was in the building management office in the sub-basement. My face was a map of mottled purple and yellow, but I wore it like a badge. The building manager, a gruff man named Sal, looked at my cheek and then quickly looked away. "Ms. Vale," he grunted. "Not often we see risk management down here." "Routine fire safety audit, Sal," I said, my voice all business. I handed him a formal request memo I'd typed up, complete with Norfield letterhead. "I'm reviewing egress protocols for all high-security floors, 20 through 25. I need to pull the full camera logs for all fire exit stairwells for the past 72 hours, just to confirm the door mechanisms are logging properly and that there are no obstructions." This was technically true. It was part of my job description. I had the right. He sighed, hating the paperwork. "Which exits?" "Just egress E to start," I said. "The one by the 23rd floor service corridor." He led me to a dusty server rack, logged into a terminal that ran on an ancient version of Windows, and began the export. "It's going to be a big file," he warned. "I brought a drive," I said, handing him a 2-terabyte encrypted SSD. 30 minutes later, I was back at my workstation, the file loading. The footage was grainy, time-stamped, and shot from a high, unflattering angle. I scrubbed to Wednesday night. 10:13 p.m. The stairwell door pushes open. Celeste. She is alone. She is not wearing her CPO power suit. She's in a dark tracksuit and a baseball cap. 10:14 p.m. She props the door open with a fire extinguisher, a violation of fire code. 10:16 p.m. She reappears, pulling a rolling dolly stacked with 6 banker's boxes. 10:17 p.m. She wheels them into the concrete stairwell, stopping right under the camera. She checks her phone. 10:18 p.m. One of the boxes tips. I freeze the frame. I zoom in, sharpening the image pixel by pixel. The label on the side of the box, written in black marker, is perfectly clear. Wellspring Vendor Files, A&N. My heart didn't race. It felt like a locking mechanism, each beat a tumbler falling into place. 10:19 p.m. She pushes the dolly through the door that leads to the loading bay. I had her. I had the financial structuring. I had the forged attendance sheets. I had the identity theft of my brother. And now I had visual confirmation of her destroying evidence. I didn't just have her for breaking the rules. I had her for felonies. I spent the next hour in a procedural cocoon. First, I exported the 12-second video clip of the box. I saved the full log file. I packaged them with the SAP logs, the PEO box confirmation, the copy-pasted signatures, and the J-Veil timesheets into a single, compressed archive. I opened my encryption utility. I imported Jordan Pike's public key. I encrypted the entire archive. This file could now only be opened by him. I uploaded the multi-gigabyte file to the secure vault, adding it to Exhibit A. Finally, I wrote a small, simple script. It was a batch file, disguised as a system diagnostic. I scheduled it to run every night at 3 a.m. The script's job was to silently copy my entire audit folder, relabel it Training Materials, Archival, and upload it to a private, non-Norfield repository I'd set up under a false name, hosted on a server in Iceland. If Celeste or her IT cronies tried to wipe my machine, it wouldn't matter. The truth would already be backed up, thousands of miles away, waiting. The audit was complete. The trap was set. The evidence was a coiled spring. Now, I had to build the mechanism to release it. A single data leak would be dismissed. A private accusation would be buried. The only way to make the truth stick was to make it public, undeniable, and catastrophic. The system Celeste had built to control information would be the very system I used to broadcast her crimes. My first step was to prime the board, not with an attack, but with a question. I drafted what I called the Gray Report. It was not an official audit. It was an anomalous findings briefing. It was 6 pages long, written in the driest possible corporate prose. It contained no names. It mentioned no fraud, no theft, no assault. It simply presented data. It showed the statistical improbability of 10 consecutive vendor payments landing at 49,800. It showed the server log metadata for cross-account delegation approvals originating from the HR department's IP range. It showed the 300% spike in consulting fees from a single vendor fund, Wellspring, against a 0% change in measured employee outcome. It showed the payroll registration for a program liaison, whose start date coincided with a hiring freeze. I submitted it not through internal email, but through the independent board's encrypted third-party portal, the very system my own anonymous proposal had recommended. The report was sent to the 3 independent members of the board of directors, the ones who were not full-time employees and did not report to my father: Arthur Vance, chair of the compensation committee, a retired judge, and a tech CEO from Chicago. I signed it simply, a Norfield Ledger stakeholder. 2 days later, Arthur Vance sent a terse, all-company email noting concerns about operational transparency and requesting departments to recommit to our cultural values. This was my opening. I sent a formal proposal to my father, Arthur Vance, and Celeste herself. The subject: Proactive Cultural Re-engagement, a town hall initiative. The email was a masterpiece of corporate obsequiousness. I wrote that in light of recent workforce anxieties, a phrase from Vance's email. We had a golden opportunity to re-energize the employee base. I suggested a company-wide town hall to be held in the main atrium, focused on our greatest strength, our culture. And who better to lead this, I wrote, than the architect of that culture? The CPO, Celeste Arden. I proposed she lead a session celebrating the 12 rules and reaffirming our commitment to radical transparency. Celeste's ego couldn't resist. It was a stage. It was a spotlight. It was a chance for her to perform. She replied all within 10 minutes. An excellent, proactive idea. Nora, my team will begin preparations at once. We will set the date for next Friday. Phase 2 was control of the broadcast. Celeste's internal comms team always handled live streams. They also knew how to hit a kill switch. I needed an outside vendor. I went to my father. Dad, I said, catching him in his office. If Celeste is doing this town hall, we should leverage it. The Westvale Financial Journal has been asking about our new benefits programs. If we're going to celebrate the culture, let's get some positive employer branding press out of it. Let's show them how we're a top place to work. He loved it. That's smart, Nora, very smart. But, I added, If the press is here, our internal AV team isn't going to cut it. The quality is terrible. We need a professional external vendor, someone who does broadcast quality streams. It'll make Celeste and the company look polished. He agreed instantly and told me to book it. Spare no expense. I hired Digital Stage Solutions, the best broadcast team in the state. I was the designated liaison from Risk, with the official duty of ensuring secure transmission of proprietary company information. During the tech setup the day before, the atrium was a chaos of cables and lighting rigs. The DSS lead, a guy named Kevin, was setting up his main control board. "I need a redundant feed," I told him, holding a high-capacity HDMI cable. "Company policy for executive broadcasts. If your primary feed fails, the system needs to auto-switch to a backup source." "Fine by me," he said, not looking up. "Where's the source?" "My laptop," I said, placing my hardened steel workstation on the tech table. "It'll just be running the official Culture You Can Trust holding slide, but the auto-switch protocol is non-negotiable." He plugged me in. Input 2. Nora Vale by redundancy. He configured the switcher. If input 1, his camera, lost its signal for more than 1 second, it would automatically fail over to input 2. Celeste's team would have a kill switch for input 1, but they wouldn't know that killing their feed would be the very thing that activated mine. Next, the audience. I sent the formal invitation to the Westvale Financial Journal, promising a major announcement on our innovative employee welfare programs and a chance to interview the CPO. They confirmed their attendance. Then, I went into my father's calendar. As CEO, his executive assistant and I were the only two with delegate access. I scheduled a mandatory, non-negotiable 90-minute block. Town Hall, executive leadership presence. I set the location as Atrium, front row, seat A1. I did the same for Arthur Vance, chair of the Compensation Committee. Atrium, front row, seat A2. My father and the board's chief auditor, sitting side by side, 5 feet from the stage. Now for the psychological bait, I needed to plant the idea in Celeste's head, to make her walk right into the trap. I sent her a private email. Subject: Town Hall. Suggestion: confidential. Celeste. Thank you again for your guidance during our meeting a few weeks ago. It was clarifying. It made me realize that many employees might not fully understand the practical application of the 12 rules. Since the theme of the town hall is transparency and culture, perhaps it would be valuable to include a case study. You could, for example, demo the correct way a disciplinary procedure is handled under the new rules. Showing a real tangible example of how we handle non-compliance would be a powerful teaching moment. Just a thought from someone who has come to appreciate the rules more deeply. Nora. I was banking on her sadism and her arrogance. The idea of publicly demonstrating her power, of reliving her victory over me in a sanitized, hypothetical way, would be irresistible. She replied an hour later, "A very constructive thought. Nora, I will incorporate it." The day before the town hall, I needed 2 last pieces. First, the physical tracker. Celeste had a specific black leather briefcase she carried to all-hands meetings, filled with her notes, her tablet, and, I suspected, her hard copies of HR files. I needed to know where that bag was, and where it went after the town hall. I found my chance at 1 p.m. She was in a final prep meeting. Her briefcase was sitting on her assistant's desk, unguarded. I stopped by to drop off a printed copy of the AV vendor's invoice, while the assistant was turned away, signing the receipt. My hand slipped into my pocket. I palmed the AirTag, a small, white disc. My fingers found the outer side pocket of her briefcase, the one she never used. I slipped it between the leather and the lining. It took less than 2 seconds. My heart was a cold hammer. I walked away. My phone's Find My app lit up. Celeste's briefcase, now tracking perfectly. Second, human corroboration. I went down to the lobby. Mike, the night guard, was on his shift. I had the official printout of the server-side access logs. "Mike, I'm just closing a loop on my fire safety audit," I said, showing him my badge. "I have the server log here for Stairwell E from last Wednesday, 22:15. It shows the door was propped, but I need to match the digital log to the physical one. You were on duty, correct?" He nodded, wary. "I just need you to look at your own handwritten checkout sheet for that night. Can you confirm who took the Stairwell E master key?" He sighed, flipped open his large, leather-bound logbook. He ran a thick finger down the page. "Yeah, right here. 10:15 p.m. Key out. 23rd floor egress." "And who signed for it?" I asked, my voice flat. He squinted. "Looks like C. Arden. Yeah, the CPO. She brought it back. Let's see. 10:19 p.m. Just a few minutes. Said she was checking a fire door. Seemed in a hurry." "Thank you. Mike, you've been very helpful." I made a check mark on my own clipboard. He had just become a witness. That night, I stood in my apartment. The bruise on my cheek was gone, faded to a sickly yellow-green shadow that makeup could easily hide. I looked at myself in the mirror. I was no longer an employee. I was no longer a daughter. I was a delivery system for a single, 30-second payload. I rehearsed the words, over and over, until they lost all meaning. Until they were just sounds. Just data. "Celeste, you are the architect of our 12 rules. You are the CPO. Can you please explain Rule 11? We do not tolerate violence, verbal or physical, in any form? And can you please explain this video, taken in conference room 23B, in which you, our chief people officer, are violating that very rule? 30 seconds, no emotion, no anger, just a query, a simple request for compliance." The trap was set. The invitations were sent. The cameras were rolling. All I had to do was wait for the show to begin. 3:14 a.m. My apartment in Norfield Quarters was a soundproof box. The only light was the antiseptic, blue-green LED from the water filter in the kitchen, casting a weak, sterile glow across the silent room. The only sound was the one I was piping directly into my skull. I sat in the dark, my laptop open, a pair of high-fidelity monitor headphones clamped over my ears. I was listening to Exhibit A, the 12-minute, 44-second recording from Conference Room 23B. I wasn't listening for the content anymore. I had memorized the script. I was listening for the texture. At 04:12, the sound of her wool suit sleeve brushing her side as she raised her hand. It was a faint, dry shh, like sand on paper. At 04:13, her sharp, preparatory intake of breath. At 04:17, the impact. The microphone was so sensitive it captured the event in 3 distinct layers. The high-frequency crack of her rings on my skin, the mid-range slap of the palm, and the low-frequency thud of the kinetic force transferring through my jaw. It was followed by 1.8 seconds of pure digital silence, an acoustic vacuum where even the room's ambient hiss was momentarily compressed. Then, my own voice, perfectly calibrated, no tremor, no shock. That is a violation of the Norfield Ledger Code of Conduct, Section 3, Subsection A. I hit stop, the silence of my apartment, thick and heavy as wool, rushed back in. I took the headphones off. My pulse was a steady 60 BPM. The machine was calibrated. My secure phone, a separate device used only for Jordan Pike, vibrated on the table, a single, jarring buzz. I picked up. "Nora, you're awake," he said. It wasn't a question. He was a man who lived by billable hours. He knew the value of the ones before dawn. "I'm reviewing the final sequence," I said. "Nora, I'm at my desk. I have the full escrow package open. The fraud case is a nuclear weapon. The identity theft of your brother. The wire fraud. That's federal. The assault video is the lighter fluid. But the bomb is the financial crime. You don't need the town hall. You can walk into the U.S. Attorney's office tomorrow and end this." "No, Jordan," I said, my voice flat. "The U.S. Attorney takes years. It's a settlement, a press release, A fine. The company survives. She gets a golden parachute and a new job in 6 months. That's not justice. That's a cost of doing business. I looked at the blue-green light, a cold, artificial star. I'm not trying to put her in jail. I'm trying to hold her accountable to the system she built. I'm not an avenger. I'm an auditor. And tomorrow, I am delivering my findings. A long sigh on his end. He was a lawyer. He was paid to mitigate risk. And I was about to become the single greatest risk in Norfield Ledger history. All right, I'll be watching the stream. I'll have the DA's on-call prosecutor on speed dial. Just, for God's sake, be what you are. Be a specialist. Keep it non-emotional. Don't give them an opening to call you hysterical. Don't make it about family. Let the data speak for you. The data, I said, is all that matters. I hung up. I turned on my desk lamp. A sharp circle of white light fell on the blotter. I went to my printer and printed a single, clean sheet, the 12 cultural rules. I took a red auditing pen. I drew a precise, 4-sided box around Rule 3. All feedback must follow sanctioned channels. Anonymous reporting is counterproductive to transparency. This was her shield, the law I broke that forced her to discipline me. I drew another box around Rule 7. We are a professional family. Do not bring personal conflicts or external grievances into the workplace. This was her castle wall, the rule that insulated her from my father, from the board, the rule that defined me as a personal conflict rather than an employee. I pressed the pen down, the ink bleeding slightly into the paper. I drew a third, final, heavy box around Rule 11. We do not tolerate violence, verbal or physical, in any form. This was my key. I folded the paper into a neat square and placed it in the breast pocket of the jacket I would wear tomorrow. My next check was hardware. I laid everything out on my dining table in a precise row. My primary phone, wiped clean of everything except the Find My app. I opened it. A small green circle pulsed steadily. Celeste's briefcase, currently located at her and my father's penthouse address. Battery, 100%. My burner phone, fully charged. It contained only one file, the 30-second video of the slap. It was a manual override, a dead man's switch in case the entire AV system failed. The button camera, a marvel of miniaturization, its lens no bigger than a grain of pepper, already sewn into the placket of the shirt I would wear. I checked its tiny independent power source and its local transmitter. This feed wasn't going to the main broadcast. It was streaming only to a micro SD card hidden inside my briefcase. My personal, tamper-proof record of the day. I had 3 distinct, redundant sources. The broadcast feed, the burner phone, the button cam. For a risk specialist, 3 is 2, 2 is 1, and 1 is none. I was covered. I opened my wallet. My fingers grazed the worn edges of a piece of blue stationery, folded 4 times. My mother's last letter to me. She died when I was 16, long before Thomas Vale became CEO, long before Celeste. Her script was a precise, elegant cursive. The ink faded, but clear. Nora, you are smarter than you think. Do not let anyone teach you your own value. They will only ever teach you theirs. I closed the wallet. This was not about emotion. This was about the provenance of my own original code. I pulled up the seating chart for the town hall atrium, a digital blueprint. I had mapped the sightlines. My father and Arthur Vance in A1 and A2. The Westvale Financial Journal reporter in B2, directly behind them, with a perfect view of their reactions. The main broadcast camera, input 1, was center stage. My laptop, input 2, the failover, was on the AV tech table, its lid closed, but its connection live. My seat, C4. Aisle, 40 feet from the podium, close enough to ask a question, far enough to be seen as a member of the crowd. I traced Celeste's path. She would enter from stage left. She would walk 22 paces to the podium. The lights would hit her. She would smile. The entire event was a machine, and I had designed every gear. Final step, I opened a new encrypted email. To Arthur, Vance, board domain, com. 2 other independent board members. Subject, blank, body, gentlemen, at the town hall tomorrow. I will speak a code phrase. The phrase is, we follow the rules here. When you hear it, and not before, you will open this link. It contains the full, unredacted findings of my investigation, a stakeholder. The link was to the Icelandic repository, the master file. The gray report I had sent them was the smoke. This link was the fire. I hit send. 5:20 a.m. The machine was set. I lay down on my bed, still dressed. I didn't set an alarm to wake up. I set a timer on my watch for 28 minutes. I didn't need sleep. I needed a system reboot. I needed to clear my internal cache. I closed my eyes. I didn't count sheep. I visualized the signal path. From my laptop, through the auto switcher, to the main projector, to the live stream, to Jordan's office. My watch vibrated against my wrist. 5:48 a.m. I sat up. My heart wasn't racing. It wasn't pounding. It was beating. A steady metronomic thump. 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 The sound of a clock. I stood in the shower for 5 minutes. The water hot, then cold. I was methodical. I stood in front of the mirror. The bruise on my cheek, the one from the slap 2 days ago, was gone. It had faded from purple to yellow to a faint, sickly shadow, a ghost of data that was no longer visible. But I hadn't just recoiled, I had braced. I went to my closet and pulled out the outfit. Simple black trousers, a stark, white, button-down shirt, no logo, no brand. It was the uniform of a clerk, of an auditor. It was a blank page. I fastened the shirt, securing the tiny camera lens in the process. I rolled the sleeves up, one neat fold. The motion revealed the last physical trace. On my inner forearm, a faint, reddish-brown discoloration, the size of a quarter, the ghost of the bruise from where my arm had hit the sharp edge of the obsidian table in 23B when I'd absorbed the impact of her hand. I looked at it for a moment. I didn't cover it. I left the sleeve rolled up. It was time to go to work. The ground floor atrium, 10:03 a.m. The air was bright, artificial, and chilled. 200 employees were crammed into rows of temporary seating, their morning coffee scent mixing with the faint, industrial smell of the atrium's water feature. Above the stage, a massive vinyl banner hung suspended between 2 steel girders. In clean, white sans-serif font, it read, "Culture you can trust." I was in seat C4, the aisle. My briefcase was on the floor between my feet, its internal transmitter humming faintly, recording my button camera feed. I scanned the front row. Seat A1, my father, Thomas Vale, looking CEO regal in a navy suit. Seat A2, Arthur Vance, chair of the Compensation Committee, his face a mask of judicial neutrality. In the row behind them, the reporter from the Westvale Financial Journal was tapping notes into her tablet. The AV tech, Kevin, gave a thumbs up from his control board. He saw me, nodded once. He thought I was his corporate liaison. He had no idea I was his co-producer. The lights dimmed. A sanitized, upbeat instrumental track, the kind you hear in corporate recruiting videos, swelled and then faded. A spotlight hit the podium. Celeste Arden walked onto the stage from stage left, 22 paces. She was wearing a crisp, white power suit. She looked radiant, confident, untouchable. She glowed. She owned the room. She smiled. A wide, magnanimous smile that flashed on the 2 12-foot screens flanking the stage. "Thank you," she said, her voice warm, resonating perfectly through the expensive speaker system. "Thank you all for being here. This is what transparency looks like." A polite ripple of applause. My father was beaming. He loved this, the family unity on full display. He nodded along to her opening, his eyes fixed on his wife. "Today," Celeste continued, "I don't want to talk about rules. I want to talk about trust. I want to talk about the trust you place in leadership and the trust we place in you. We've built a culture here based on positive discipline and mutual respect. I watched my father. He was nodding, completely absorbed. My button cam was live. My laptop, 50 feet away on the tech table, was sleeping. Its HDMI cable a silent, digital tripwire connected to the main switcher. My team has prepared a short presentation, Celeste said, to reaffirm our disciplinary process, not as a set of punishments, but as a roadmap to success. Can we have slide 1, please? The screen behind her lit up. The 12 rules. A path to partnership. She was brilliant. I had to give her that. She was turning a corporate policy manual into a motivational speech. She clicked through the slides. Embrace radical transparency. Own your outcomes. She was relaxed, charming, hitting every note. The crowd was with her. Then she got to slide 5. Our disciplinary process. A 3-step dialogue. 1. A formal warning. 2. A documented performance plan. 3. A private one-on-one session with HR leadership to discuss cultural alignment. She smiled at the third point. This last step is the most crucial. It's where we truly connect. It's a dialogue. It's often held in a private meeting, sometimes after hours, to ensure complete confidentiality and respect for the employee. This was it. She had just read my email suggestion into the microphone. She had just validated my premise. My hand went up. I didn't wave it. I just raised it, straight and steady, in the third row, an aisle seat, a single hand in a white shirt. Celeste's eyes scanned the crowd and locked onto me. Her smile faltered for a microsecond. She saw her disgruntled stepdaughter. She thought this was an act of petty, public defiance. She decided to make an example of me. Yes, Nora, she said, her voice dripping with condescending patience. You have a question? The house lights came up slightly. People turned in their seats to look at me. I stood up. My heart was not pounding. It was a cold, precise mechanism. Thump, thump, thump. Thank you. CPO Arden, I said, my voice projecting clearly to the mic on the podium. This is very informative. You mentioned the importance of these steps. I was wondering if you could illustrate this for us. Could you, perhaps, walk us through a real, practical situation where you personally had to implement these steps recently? The bait was in the water. The press was here. The board was here. Her ego was on stage. She couldn't refuse. A slow smile spread across her face. This was exactly what she wanted. She was going to humiliate me by using my own question against me. That is an excellent, constructive question, Nora, she said. I'm happy to provide a hypothetical. Actually, I pressed, my voice still perfectly polite. I think we'd all benefit from a real-world example. It's a core part of our training, isn't it? Real case studies? The atrium was dead silent. The only sound was the hum of the projector. My father was frowning now, sensing the shift in the room, confused. Celeste held my gaze. Her eyes were chips of ice. She was going to enjoy this. Very well, she said. A real-world example. Hypothetically, of course. She turned slightly to address the whole room, but her words were aimed at me. When an employee breaks a foundational rule, let's say, Rule 3, by circumventing sanctioned channels, that employee is brought in for a private, one-on-one session. They are reminded of their obligations, they are shown the error of their ways, and they are disciplined. Because here at Norfield Ledger, she had just loaded the gun and handed it to me. I cut her off. My voice was no longer polite. It was a flat, digital command. We follow the rules here. The code phrase, I watched Arthur Vance, in the front row. His head snapped up. He pulled his phone from his pocket. I watched Kevin, the AV tech. He was looking at his main board, confused. The signal from Celeste's comms team, Input 1, had just gone dead. Her own team, panicked that I was speaking out of turn, had hit their kill switch. The failover protocol I had installed kicked in instantly. The system auto-switched. Input 1, black. Input 2, Nora Vale redundancy. The two 12-foot screens behind Celeste flickered. The slide a 3-step dialogue vanished. It was replaced by the dark, grainy, wide-angle shot of conference room 23B. My laptop was now the projector. The audio, piped directly from my machine into the broadcast-grade sound system, was immaculate. Celeste's voice, not the warm, amplified stage voice, but the cold, hissing whisper from the recording, filled the atrium. Breaking the rules, Nora. Celeste was still smiling, confused. She hadn't turned around. She didn't know what the audience was seeing. Then she heard her own voice. Her smile froze. On screen, the video Nora stepped back. The video Celeste leaned in. What rule allows you to isolate an employee after hours? My rules. And then, at 10:09 a.m., in a silent atrium, in front of 200 employees, the press, and the board, the sound of the slap. It was not a stage sound. It was brutal, wet, and final. It echoed off the marble walls, a sonic crack that made people in the front row physically flinch. The entire room gasped as one. A woman in the back row screamed, a short, sharp sound. Celeste spun around. She saw herself on the giant screen, her hand raised, her face contorted in a mask of rage. She stared, her mouth open, all color draining from her face. No, she whispered, but the mic picked it up. No, that's... In the front row, my father, Thomas Vale, rose to his feet. He didn't move slowly. He shot up, as if yanked by a wire. His face was white. He stared at the screen, then at his wife on the stage, then back to the screen. His eyes were wide, unblinking. He didn't understand. The video loop was only 30 seconds. It played again. Breaking the rules. Nora. Crack. My rules. Crack. The reporter from the Journal was no longer typing. She was holding her phone up, recording the screen. Celeste's team, in a total panic, cut power to the entire AV rig. The screens went black. The sound cut off. The house lights snapped on, harsh and fluorescent. The silence that followed was heavier, more violent than the sound had been. Every eye was on Celeste. That is not real, Celeste stammered, her voice a strained, high-pitched wreck. That is a deep fake. It's fabricated. Nora, she is a disgruntled... It is a digital recording, time-stamped, with a verified hash, I said. My voice was cold, carrying easily through the stunned silence. It is Exhibit A, already logged with independent counsel. My father turned his head, his movements stiff, robotic. He looked at me, not as a CEO, not as a husband, as a father. He saw the shadow of the old bruise on my cheek, the one he'd never noticed. Nora, he whispered. It was a question. But that, I said, my voice rising, cutting through the chaos, is just a violation of the company's culture. I was more concerned about the violation of federal law. I didn't need the screens anymore. I had the floor. I am the stakeholder who filed the gray report with the board, the report on the Wellspring Fund. I looked at Celeste. The fund you control? I pulled a single sheet of paper from my briefcase, a still frame. While the board was reviewing my data, I announced, Celeste Arden was destroying the evidence. I held up the paper. It was the grainy still from the Exit E camera. I had printed it large enough for the front rows to see. This is CPO Celeste Arden, last Wednesday night, at 10:17 p.m., in the Egress E stairwell, the one camera she doesn't control. She is seen here removing 6 bankers' boxes of evidence. I held up a second still, a zoom in on the tipped box. The boxes, as you can see, are labeled Wellspring Vendor Files, ANN. I let the words hang. ANN, as in Arden and North, the phantom consulting firm she set up, the firm she has paid $500,000 to from the Employee Welfare Fund, the firm registered to her cousin, the firm whose invoices were for ghost workshops, and whose payments were approved, using my father's delegated authority. My father stumbled, his hand going to his chest. Celeste? Arthur Vance put a hand on his arm. not in support, but to steady him. The room was no longer silent. It was a rising tide of whispers, of gasps, of phone screens lighting up. Celeste was trapped. The lights were on. There was no stage magic. "You," she hissed, pointing a shaking finger at me, her face a mask of pure hate. "You, lying, bitch." I just looked at her. I had not raised my voice. I had not cried. I had not accused. I had presented data. The machine had done its work. The atrium was a vacuum. My last words, using my father's delegated authority, hung in the dead, fluorescent air. Celeste's accusation of lying was still echoing. "I am not lying. CPO Arden," I said, my voice cutting through the stunned silence. The AV system was dead, so I was projecting, my voice trained from years of addressing risk committees. Every employee, every executive, heard me. "I am auditing. You are correct that the video is not the only evidence." I stepped out of my row and walked calmly to the front, standing in the open space between the front row and the stage. I addressed Arthur Vance and my father directly. The reporter was 3 feet behind them, her pen flying across her notepad. "The video of the assault," I stated, "was simply the procedural error that triggered a full-spectrum audit. The crime is the fraud." I held up a new sheaf of papers from my briefcase. "This is the full payment log for Arden and North. You will see 10 payments, each for $49,800, each one precisely $200 below the $50,000 automated audit flag. This is not coincidence. This is structuring, a felony." I continued, the pace quickening, each sentence a new exhibit. "The vendor code, 909ANC, matches the purchase order request sent from Celeste's personal email, which I have included. The vendor address, 14 Norcross Lane, is a P.N.O. box, and Arden and North, LLC, was registered 1 week after her engagement to the CEO by a man named Harrison North, her first cousin." A wave of sharp, inhaled breaths from the crowd. The whispers were turning into a roar. "And where did this $500,000 go?" I didn't wait for an answer. I held up the next page. It was siphoned from the Wellspring Employee Welfare Fund. Then, I delivered the next blow. But stealing from employees wasn't enough. She had to steal from her own family. I held up the final sheet. "This is the timesheet for the Norfield Future childcare pilot. You will see a salaried employee named Jay Vale, that is Jason Vale, my brother. He is a 20-year-old sophomore at UC San Diego, studying marine biology. He has never worked for this company, and yet, Celeste Arden has been paying him, or rather, a bank account opened in his name, a salary of $1,500 a week for the last 6 months." The room exploded. The sound was a physical thing, a rush of outrage. Employees were standing up, shouting. My father just stared at me, his face ash gray, his hand still on his chest. He looked like a man who had been shot and didn't know it yet. On stage, Celeste was shaking, her face a terrifying mask of white rage and panic. "Deepfake!" she shrieked, her voice cracking, raw and ugly. "It's all deepfakes, the video, the documents. She faked all of it. She's a tech expert. She's framing me. It's all lies." I did not raise my voice. I did not engage. I simply looked at Arthur Vance. "Mr. Vance?" I said, my voice dropping back to its cold, procedural calm. "Every one of these allegations is backed by immutable data. The video file's integrity is confirmed by an SHA-256 hash, which is available for immediate verification. The server logs from SAP are time-stamped, cross-referenced with the building's key log and the delegation authority logs from my father's own account. The metadata is clean." I took one more step forward and placed a single, slim manila folder on the edge of the stage, directly in front of him. "And all original, unredacted files, including the video, the full server logs, and the incorporation papers for Arden and North, are currently held in secure third-party escrow by Mr. Jordan Pike of Pike & Associates. This," I tapped the folder, is his notarized letter of receipt. The data is secure. The data is real. The data is here. Arthur Vance did not look at me. He didn't even look at Celeste. He looked to his left, at a man in a gray suit I knew to be Alan Gould, the company's general counsel. Vance's voice was low, but it carried the absolute authority of the board. Alan, suspend all CPO functions, immediately, secure her office, her accounts, and her access. That was the moment, the pivot. The system had officially turned. My father finally exhaled. It was not a sigh, it was a gasp, a painful tearing sound. He turned, slowly, to the woman on the stage, the woman he had married. Celeste? It was just one word. It was not an accusation. It was a question, a plea. It was the sound of a man watching his entire world dissolve. Celeste heard him. She turned her head. She looked at her husband. Her entire facade, the CPO, the wife, the powerful executive. It didn't just crack. It shattered and fell away. Her smile, the one she had used to charm him, to control the room, to slap my face. It collapsed. It slid off her face like cheap paint in the rain, leaving only the terrified, furious, and beaten woman underneath. She turned away from him, a convulsive, ugly movement. She stumbled back, away from the audience. She grabbed the podium to steady herself. I took one step toward the stage. I looked up at the woman who had hit me, who had stolen from my family, who had corrupted my company. I did not shout. I did not whisper. I just spoke, clearly into the wreckage. Celeste, I said. She flinched, turning back, her eyes wide with hate. I read from the paper in my pocket, the paper with the 3 red boxes. Rule number 11 of the Norfield Ledger Code of Conduct, I said, my voice flat, an auditor closing a file. We do not tolerate violence, verbal or physical, in any form. As I said the last word, she recoiled, her hand slipping from the podium. Her hand struck the gooseneck microphone. It toppled from its base and fell to the stage floor. It made a single, dry, hollow thud, an unamplified, definitive, final sound. Alan Gould, the general counsel, was already on the stage. He was flanked by 2 building security guards, their faces impassive. Celeste, Gould said, his voice quiet. Let's go. We need to talk about this in a private room. She didn't move. She just stared at me, her chest heaving. Let's go, he repeated, firmer. The guards took a step forward. She looked at them, then at the audience, then at my father, who would not meet her eyes. She was, for the first time, without rules, without power, and without allies. She let them escort her off the stage, walking past the "Culture You Can Trust" banner without a backward glance. The atrium was a sea of upturned faces, of illuminated phone screens, of employees whispering in open shock. The live stream, I knew, was still running. The external vendor was still broadcasting. The reporter from the Financial Journal was not filming the dramatic exit. She had turned around. She was filming the board. She was filming Arthur Vance as he picked up my folder. She was filming my father as he sank back into his chair, his head in his hands. Then she panned up, zooming in on the corporate banner, which was still blinking faintly. A broken circuit, a signal trying to connect to a feed that was already dead. Culture You Can Trust. Culture You Can Trust. The atrium was in chaos, but I did not stay to watch it. As Alan Gould and the security team escorted a white-faced, shaking Celeste from the stage, Arthur Vance caught my eye. He didn't speak. He just inclined his head, a sharp, single gesture toward the executive elevators. The message was clear. I walked out of the atrium, the wave of 200 stunned, whispering employees parting for me as if I were a ghost. The elevator ride to the 25th floor, the boardroom floor, was silent. The air in the car felt pressurized, humming. My reflection in the dark, polished steel, was just a shape in a white shirt. The button camera was still recording. The boardroom doors opened. The room was cold, as it always was. The long, obsidian-dark mahogany table reflected the recessed ceiling lights like a still, black lake. They were already there. Alan Gould, the general counsel, stood at the head of the table, his suit jacket already off, his face grim. Arthur Vance, the chairman of the Compensation Committee, sat to his right, his posture rigid, and to his left, slumped in the heavy executive chair, was my father. Thomas Vale looked 20 years older. His face was gray, slack, the confident energy of the CEO completely drained. He was staring at the flawless polish of the table, not at me. He looked like a man who had survived a plane crash, only to realize he was the pilot. I did not sit down. I walked to the far end of the table, the position reserved for a presenter. I placed my briefcase on the table and opened it with 2 quiet, precise clicks. "Ms. Vale," Alan Gould began, his voice raspy, "this is a catastrophic failure of controls. The legal and financial exposure it was a calculated failure of governance." I interrupted. My voice was as cold and flat as the room. I was no longer the accuser. I was the auditor. I slid a thin, bound document across the table. It glided over the polish and stopped perfectly in front of Arthur Vance. "This," I said, "is the root cause analysis. You can find the timestamp in the metadata. It was submitted to the Independent Board's private portal 6 months ago." Vance opened it. His eyes scanned the title. "A Proposed Protocol for Independent Reporting and Whistleblower Protection." He looked up at me. "You wrote this?" "Yes," I said. Which brings me to my first disclosure. I was the anonymous stakeholder who filed the initial Wellspring Fund alert. I knowingly violated Celeste Arden's Rule Number 3, the one prohibiting anonymous channels, because it was, in itself, an illegal policy. It was designed to suppress compliance, enable fraud, and insulate her from discovery. My actions, however, were in full compliance with Section 922 of the Dodd-Frank Act and state law. I was, and am, a protected whistleblower. Gould's head snapped up. The legal implications of that statement were profound. I wasn't just an employee. I was a protected legal entity. "Second," I continued, sliding another single sheet across the table. "The entity, Arden and North. This is the state incorporation filing, registered to a Mr. Harrison North. Celeste's first cousin, the address, 14 Norcross Lane, is a virtual mail drop. The payments, structured at $49,800, were not just a circumvention of our audit controls. They were overt wire fraud, funneled to a family member, using forged attendance documents and the stolen identity of Jason Vale." My father flinched at his son's name, as if he'd been struck again. "Third," I said, "the unauthorized disciplinary action in Conference Room 23B. I used the formal term. The video evidence is absolute, but it is also corroborated." I slid a third, final sheet. "This is the server-side access log for the 23rd floor, cross-referenced with the building's physical keycard system. It confirms that the master key for room 23B was checked out using CPO Celeste Arden's executive access card at 7:40 p.m. on October 23rd, 2 minutes before I was summoned, and returned at 7:51 p.m. after I was dismissed. It was a premeditated, unsanctioned meeting, and she used company assets to facilitate a physical assault." I closed my briefcase. My presentation was over. "This is not," I said, my voice resonating in the dead quiet, "just about one executive's personal failings. This is a systemic rot. The CPO, who was also the CEO's wife, was given unchecked authority. She used that authority to terrorize employees, steal from the company, and defraud its welfare fund. She created a culture of fear, and my father's conflict of interest allowed it to flourish." I looked at the three of them. "My demands are not personal. They are procedural. 1. The immediate formation of an independent special committee, to be chaired by Mr. Vance, to oversee a full third-party forensic audit of the HR department, the Wellspring Fund, and all vendor contracts approved by Celeste Arden in the last 8 months. 2. A full and immediate review of all disciplinary actions, reassignments, and compensation denials enacted by the CPO's office since her appointment. All employees found to be adversely affected by her cultural discipline, like Mark in marketing, are to be fully remediated, with retroactive compensation and apologies. 3. The permanent separation of the HR ethics and compliance function from the CEO's office. This conflict of interest can never, ever happen again. The silence in the room stretched. It was Alan Gould who spoke first. He nodded, his face a mask of grim calculation. The company was facing shareholder lawsuits, a federal investigation, and a press nightmare. Mr. Vance, Gould said, I concur with Ms. Vale's assessment. Our legal exposure is total. We must act with extreme prejudice. I recommend to the chairman that we vote, this instant, on the immediate and indefinite suspension of CPO Celeste Arden, pending the results of this external investigation. We must freeze all her accounts, revoke all system privileges, and issue a full preservation order for all documents. We must also formally grant Ms. Vale full whistleblower status and all protections under the law. Arthur Vance nodded slowly. I agree. We will vote on that motion. Wait! My father's hand slammed down on the mahogany table. The sound was a violent crack in the sterile room. He pushed himself up, his chair scraping backward. His face was ravaged, a mix of shame, grief, and a desperate, dwindling authority. Wait, he said again, his voice cracking. Nora, please, this is my wife you're talking about, my life. Can we not handle this? Can we talk? As a family? His eyes pleaded with me. He was no longer a CEO. He was just a man. Begging. He was trying to pull me back, out of the operating room, back into the messy, emotional, compromised world of family. I turned my head. I met his gaze. My voice was not just cold, it was dead. In this meeting, Thomas, I said, using his first name for the first time in my professional life. I am not your daughter. I am Nora Vale. I am the senior risk specialist who uncovered a multi-million-dollar fraud and a pattern of systemic abuse. I let the words land, sharp as scalpels. I am the whistleblower, and you are the CEO who failed to see it. It broke him. The last light of father in his eyes went out. He slumped back into his chair, a hollowed-out shell. The family argument was terminated. Arthur Vance looked away from my father, his face hard as granite. He turned to Gould. Alan, get the other 2 independent board members on the phone. Conference call, now. Gould was already dialing. A moment later, 2 tinny, disembodied voices filled the room. What is this? What's happening? Our stock is tanking. Vance's voice was a low growl. I am calling an emergency vote of the independent board. The CPO, Celeste Arden, has been found to have engaged in gross misconduct, including but not limited to felony fraud, embezzlement of company funds, and systemic violation of company policy and law. I am moving for her immediate, indefinite suspension, the formation of a special committee to investigate, and the full protection of the whistleblower, Nora Vale. All in favor? Aye, said Vance. Aye, said the voice from Chicago. Aye, said the voice of the retired judge in New York. Alan Gould looked at Vance. The independent members are unanimous. Vance turned, his gaze falling on my father, the CEO. Thomas? Vance asked. My father did not look up. He was staring at his own hands, flat on the dark, reflective wood. A long, agonizing second passed. He exhaled, a ragged breath. Aye, he whispered. The motion passes unanimously, Vance declared. Celeste Arden's employment is suspended. Her access is revoked. Effective now. Alan Gould was already on his secure line, his voice low and urgent. Security. Initiate containment protocol. CPO. Now. Full lockout. All systems. I did not return to the 14th floor. I did not return to my desk. I took the glass elevator from the 25th floor, the boardroom, straight down to the ground. The descent was silent, a smooth, pressurized drop. The chaos of the atrium, which I had left 90 minutes ago, had settled. The emergency, the shock, had passed. It had been replaced by a different kind of tension. 12:11 p.m. The lobby was no longer a thoroughfare. It was a holding area. Employees, who should have been at lunch, were gathered in small, tight clusters, their voices a low, anxious murmur. They stood by the security turnstiles, near the coffee bar, by the glass walls looking out onto the plaza. They were pretending to check their phones, pretending to talk, but really, they were just waiting for the next part of the story. The atrium's espresso machine, which had been silent during the town hall, hissed violently, a long, pressurized sigh as a barista purged the steam wand. The sound was shocking in the quiet, a return to a mundane reality that no longer fit. I stood by the main pillar, the one etched with Rule 1. We iterate with integrity. I was just another employee, waiting. The executive elevator, the one my father and the board used, remained closed. Instead, a service door near the security desk opened, the one that led to the back corridors and, eventually, to the parking garage. Alan Gould, the general counsel, walked out first. He looked exhausted, his tie loose. Behind him, 2 building security guards. They were not touching her, but they were flanking her, and between them, Celeste. She was not in the white power suit she had worn on stage. She was in the street clothes she had presumably been given from her office. She was carrying her black leather briefcase, the one I had tagged. My primary phone, in my pocket, vibrated, a single, haptic buzz. I pulled it out, the Find My app, a small, gray notification. Celeste's briefcase has been left behind. It hadn't been left behind. It was on the move. The app was just telling me it was leaving the building's geofence. It was leaving the premises. My tag was still broadcasting. She was officially, systemically, being ejected. She walked past the clusters of employees. The murmuring stopped. The atrium went dead silent. It was the sound of 200 people holding their breath. She was not crying. Her face was not red. It was a pale, flat, waxy mask. Her eyes, which had been chips of ice, were now just dark. They were embers. She saw me, standing by the pillar. She stopped. The security guard stopped with her. Alan Gould turned, his face tight with annoyance. She changed direction, walking the 10 feet of marble that separated us. The sound of her heels on the floor was the only sound in the world. A hard, angry click, click, click. She stopped 3 feet in front of me. The atrium watched. This was the epilogue. She looked at my face, at my white shirt, at my rolled-up sleeves. Her gaze flickered to the faint, yellowed shadow of the bruise on my forearm. "You," she said. Her voice was not a shriek. It was a low, guttural rasp, full of gravel and poison. "You destroyed this family." I did not react. I did not move. I looked at this woman, the CPO, my stepmother, the architect. I saw the lines of failure, the collapse of her carefully constructed world. She had to blame someone. She had to believe I was the cause. She couldn't see that she was the system and the flaw, all in one. I did not defend myself. I did not argue. I just gave her the data. I didn't destroy a family. "Celeste," I replied, my voice perfectly even, so quiet that only she and the guards could hear it. "I just recorded how you chose to run your family inside my workplace." I called her Celeste, not CPO, not ma'am. The protocol was over. For a second, her mask of control almost broke. Her hand, the one holding the briefcase, clenched, the leather groaning. I thought, for a moment, she might lunge. She might finish what she started in room 23B. I didn't flinch. "Ma'am?" It was Mike, the night guard, now on day shift security. He had stepped forward, his voice polite, but with a new edge of iron. "Ma'am, I need to ask you for your access card, your building pass and all company keys." Celeste tore her eyes away from me and stared at him. This was the final indignity. Not the CEO, not the board, a man in a blue blazer, A man she had never bothered to learn the name of was the one to deliver the final, procedural blow. You can't, she stammered, falling back on a reflex of authority that was already dead. I'm afraid I have to, ma'am, Mike said, his voice still gentle. He held out his hand, palm up, for a long, terrible moment. Celeste just stood there, her chest heaving. Then, with a gesture of pure, reptilian rage, she ripped the lanyard from around her neck. She didn't unclip it. She yanked it, the fabric snapping. She held the access card, her own face smiling up from the plastic ID. She didn't hand it to him. She threw it on the floor. It skittered across the marble and came to rest by his foot. The retractable cord, which she had pulled to its limit, snapped back into the plastic holder. Zzz, click. It was a small, cheap sound. The sound of a lock, of a door, of a life, clicking shut. Mike didn't say a word. He bent down, picked it up, and slotted it into a revoked pouch on his belt. Alan Gould took her arm. Celeste, it's time to go. She let him lead her away. As she turned, I saw him, my father. He was standing by the main elevators, about 5 meters away. He had not been with the group. He must have come down on his own. He was just watching. He was a man in an expensive suit, standing alone in the lobby of his own company. He was looking at me, his face a ruin of confusion, betrayal, and a kind of dawning, horrific understanding. His mouth was slightly open. He was the CEO, the husband, the father, and he had failed at all three. Our eyes met for 1/50th of a second. I looked away. I broke the connection. I turned my head slightly, focusing on the dark, non-reflective glass of the coffee bar. It was my own. Final rule. A new one. Do not mix injury with work. The audit was complete. The work was done. What remained between us was injury, and I would not, could not, process that here. Not now. Not in his lobby. This was not a family reconciliation. This was a damage report. My company phone buzzed, the one issued by Norfield Ledger. I pulled it out. It was a company-wide email. From Alan Gould, General Counsel, Office of the CEO. Subject, an update on our commitment to safety and ethics. Sent, 12:13 p.m. Dear Norfield team, today, we were faced with a difficult but necessary challenge to our culture. We have always said that we prioritize integrity. Today, we proved it, effective immediately. Celeste Arden has been suspended from all duties as CPO, pending a full, independent, third-party investigation. We are taking this time to reaffirm our commitment to a safe, ethical, and transparent workplace where all employees feel secure. We thank the brave individual who brought these matters to our attention. Brave individual. I smiled, a small, cold twitch of the lips. I was a stakeholder, an individual. I was a variable, now resolved. The system was already patching itself, writing the new code, painting over the bloodstain with sterile, corporate language. A shadow passed over me. Someone from one of the hushed clusters was walking past me, heading for the exit. It was Sarah Jenkins, from marketing, the woman whose signature had been forged on the ghost meeting spreadsheets. She didn't stop. She didn't look at me. She didn't say thank you as she passed. Her hand brushed my arm, and her fingers gave my sleeve a quick, light squeeze. It was gone in a second. It was not a gesture of friendship. It was an acknowledgement, a shared data point. It was enough. I put my company phone away. I took out my other phone, the burner, the one I had used to record Exhibit A. I opened the secure folder. There it was. Black box, rec char 10, 23. 23B. MP4 12 minutes, 44 seconds. My finger hovered over the file. The original was in Jordan's vault. The master file was with the board. The Icelandic backup was secure. This one, the one on my person, was now just a liability. A ghost. I pressed delete. A small pop-up asked, "Are you sure you want to permanently delete this item?" I pressed yes. The file vanished. My phone was clean. I slid it back into my pocket. I walked toward the main doors. I had no destination. I just knew I was no longer needed inside this building. The automatic doors sensed my approach and slid open with a pneumatic whoosh. The late October air hit me. It was cold, sharp, and smelled of diesel fumes and damp pavement. It was real. A gust of wind blew past me, into the atrium, catching the bottom of the massive "Culture You Can Trust" banner that still hung from the rafters. The wind lifted the heavy vinyl, making it ripple and flap, a slow, heavy, percussive sound. Thwack, 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 like a broken sail, like a failing wing. I did not look back. I stepped out of the shadow of the building and into the flat, bright, midday sun. I wasn't in the lobby for more than a minute after Celeste was escorted out. Alan Gould's assistant, a woman with a pale, efficient face, had appeared at my elbow. "Mr. Vance requests your presence. Executive Briefing Room 25B. I was summoned, not as a daughter, not as a colleague, as a witness, as an asset. Now, at 12:30 p.m., I was back on the 25th floor. This was not the grand boardroom where my father had been broken. This was a smaller room, an adjunct, a functional glass box built for surgical decisions and signing settlements. The air was cold, filtered, and silent. Arthur Vance was there, standing by the window, looking down at the city. Alan Gould, the general counsel, was at the table, a stack of new documents in front of him. My father was not present. The family variable had been successfully isolated and removed from the equation. The corporate body was healing, and the first step was to amputate the conflicting parts. I remained standing. No one offered me a seat. This was not a meeting, it was a transaction. "Nora," Arthur Vance said. He did not use my last name. He did not call me Ms. Vale. It was a gesture of something, not warmth, respect. The respect one professional gives another for a job executed with lethal precision. "The independent board has enacted your proposal," he said, turning from the window. "The full proposal." He indicated the paper on the table. Alan Gould, in a precise, procedural gesture, slid it toward me. It was thick, bonded paper, heavy with the watermark of the company. At the top, the title was printed in a heavy, bold font: Norfield Ledger Official Policy, Whistleblower and Non-Retaliation Protocol. Below it, a line, effective immediately, 10/25/2025. This was not just the protocol I had written in my apartment 6 months ago, the one I had sent into the void. This was the enacted version. My anonymous, ignored draft was now the new law. My code was being compiled directly into the system. "The Independent Special Committee is formed," Vance said, his voice a low rumble. "The external forensic auditors are being retained as we speak. The remediation fund for all affected employees, as per your second demand, has been authorized by the Emergency Board." "A formality," Alan Gould said, his voice smooth. The lawyer's voice, the one that seals the vault. "We require your signature to acknowledge your role as the originator of this policy and to formally accept the full and total protections outlined within as the whistleblower." He slid a pen across the table. It was a heavy, silver-plated rollerball, the same brand Celeste had pushed at me in conference room 23B, demanding my confession. The irony was thick, metallic. I picked up the pen. It was cold in my hand. My hand was perfectly steady. I looked at the signature line. It didn't say employee. It said, "Acknowledged by originator." I signed my name, Nora Vale. The ink was a sharp, definitive black against the white paper. I had not just signed a document. I had closed a file. I had ended the audit. Gould took the paper back, his relief a physical thing. The legal liability was now contained. The whistleblower was now a protected asset, no longer a rogue agent. The system was balanced. "One last thing," Gould said, gesturing to the corner of the room. I hadn't noticed him. A single broadcast camera operator, the one from the external vendor, was standing by his tripod. The camera was not the large one from the atrium. It was smaller, more discreet. Its small red recording light was on. It was feeding directly to the company-wide stream, which, I now realized, had never been cut. The company-wide communication is still active, Gould explained, his voice now taking on a public relations smoothness. The atrium is waiting. The entire company is waiting. They need a final word. Nora, a close. They need to see that the system worked, that the person who brought this forward is safe, recognized, and protected. They need to see that we are, in fact, a culture you can trust. He was handing me the script. He wanted me to sanitize it. He wanted me to be the face of the new Norfield. He wanted me to smile, to talk about integrity, to talk about ethics, to talk about moving forward together. He wanted me to provide the soothing, corporate epilogue. I looked at Gould. I looked at Vance. They were waiting for their soundbite. I turned away from them. I did not walk toward the camera. I simply turned my head and looked directly down the barrel of the lens. The red light was a single, unblinking eye. I knew that in the atrium far below, and on laptops and monitors across the company, my face was now on every screen. They were waiting for the moral of the story. I gave them only the code, the loop, the close. We follow the rules here. I said nothing else. Gould's face tightened. It was not the reassurance he wanted. It was not the warm, healing statement he had prepped for. But it was the truth. It was a statement of fact, and it was a warning. On the monitor on the wall, I watched my own face disappear from the feed. It was instantly replaced by a blue and white corporate slide, the one I had seen being prepped. Announcement: Employee Welfare Fund Restoration. All funds improperly diverted from the Wellspring Fund will be restored in full, effective immediately. A full external audit and remediation for all employees subject to improper disciplinary action under the prior CPO administration is now in effect. I watched the screen, and then, through the soundproof glass of the 25th floor, I heard it, a faint, muffled sound from the atrium far below. It was the sound of applause. It was not a roar. It was a scattered, hesitant sound at first, as people processed the words. Then, it grew thicker, heavier, more confident. They were not clapping for me. They were clapping for the money. They were clapping for the end of the fear. They were clapping for the fact that the storm had passed and they still had their jobs. They were clapping for the restoration of order. It was the sound of the system rebooting. I turned back to the table. I had left my briefcase there. I closed it. The sound of the two polished nickel latches clicking shut was small, but absolute in the silent room. Click, click. I did not shake their hands. I did not thank them. I did not ask about my father. I turned and walked to the door. Nora, Arthur Vance said, just as my hand touched the handle. I stopped, but I did not turn around. You are an asset to this company, he said. His voice was a low growl of approval. Your adherence to protocol is remarkable. Your future here is secure. He was offering me a reward. He was offering me a place in the new order. He was offering me a seat at his table. I said nothing. I opened the door and walked out. As I stood waiting for the elevator, my secure phone vibrated in my pocket. The one Jordan used, the one that held the original copy of my life. A single text message had appeared on the black screen. From Jordan Pike. Done. It was a single word. It meant the escrow had been transferred. The external copy of the evidence was now the property of the board. My role as custodian was over. The package was delivered. I was free. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside and stepped out onto the street. 12:41 p.m. The sun was high. Directly overhead, it was a flat, neutral, noon sun, casting no long, dramatic shadows. It was the bright, revealing light of an auditing room, now flooding the entire city. I stood on the pavement, the noise of the street, the trucks, the horns, the people, rushing into the vacuum the morning had left behind. I looked down at the concrete. My shadow was a sharp, dark shape, drawn precisely at my feet. It was perfectly, completely still. It was not shaking. There was no need for an epilogue. There was no need for a final word. The data had been presented. The audit was closed. Her law, the one she wrote in boardrooms and enforced with a slap, had ended exactly where it began, in front of a camera. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We're a global community, and I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please drop a comment below to let me know where in the world you are and share your thoughts on Nora's Revenge. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe and like the video, and to help this story reach more people, please consider supporting us by hitting that hype button. It makes a huge difference.